you don't mind, Nolan. I'm
Cool.
sorry.
No worries. Then with that, I think we can go ahead and jump into the school district's presentation.
Okay. Just before I start, we do have a 1 o'clock meeting to get back to talk about COVID-19, so we'll probably skate out of here about 25 till. So we put a hard copy of the brief in front of you and a copy of the proposed budget pamphlet, which is really the executive overview that's part of the 600-page budget book.
If you'd like a copy of the big budget book too, we have some extras we can give to you. You don't want just the electronic version, but yeah.
Okay, so if we go to, I think everyone can skip past the agenda.
Hey, Jim.
Yes, sir.
Just could you say your name for the record so that we got it recorded?
I'm sorry.
And that way we know who's speaking.
I'm Jim Anderson. I'm the Chief Finance Officer for Anchorage School District, and
I'm Andy Ratliff. I'm the Director of the Office of Management and Budget for the school district.
Thank you, Jim.
so if you look at page 2, which is the top slide, is the projected ASD operating budget deficit. This just gives you a quick glance as to what our budget deficit would be if we continued to have flat funding for the next 5 years, out through 2025. I think everyone's aware that late December, the courts ruled that the governor could not take our House Bill 287 money this year. He had tried to hold that back because he thought future year funding was improper or illegal. The court ruled against him that, in fact, we could have it. So that little star gives you an idea. That's really what set us at FY20. So if you look at it, when we looked at the FY21 budget, we had about a $10 to $12 million increase, just inflationary costs for our district. And then we were going to lose the outside the formula money, which for us this year was a little over $10 million. When you added the state and the local money in together. So it created about a $20 million structural deficit that we had to meet as we built our budget for next school year. And you can see the assumptions on the bottom. So the slide on the bottom of the page shows the areas that we examined. So we looked at schools and programs. We did a deep dive. Our guidance from the board was to not touch PTR, which is pupil to teacher ratio, unless we absolutely had to. We looked at everything from merging and closing schools, modifying programs, which we did in fact recommend for this budget, merging and closing programs, and other cost savings initiatives. We did a really deep dive on school activities later on in the next couple months. We'll send out what will be modified activity costings for next year in order to increase the revenue in that account. By and large, the schools collect about, we spend about $5 million in general funds every year for activities. So we're trying to increase the revenue a little bit in order to decrease our expenses to support activities. And then naturally, on the bottom, we looked at district-wide operations across the board. A slide that Andy and I gave the board, if you flip the page, on general fund cost drivers. These are some facts about, in general, how much does it cost us to run the district. And you can see that on this page was Ignite program. We did recommend that it be redesigned. That was overturned, as you'll see in the bottom. And as we go through the brief, I think you'll see what we ended up coming up with at the end of the day. So the second slide on that page is the budget drivers. Biggest one for us is school board goals and the school board guidance and policy. The community values and vision, we had an external survey and internal survey where we could get bottoms-up feedback from employees and students, and we used that to develop the budget. So if you flip one page to the top of page 4, slide titled FY21 preliminary budget. So the budget that we came up with did address the nearly $20 million deficit. It did focus on student needs and outcomes. We did recommend redesigning Ignite, which didn't occur, but we're still continuing next year on how are we going to redesign it potentially for the following year. So we're going to try to expand the opportunities we give advanced learners. We did preserve the health curriculum at elementary level. I think those who were in the last Joint Assembly Board meeting got a taste of some of the angst from the community on health teachers. And just to clarify, until about 6 years ago, all health was taught by standard elementary teachers, PE teachers, nurses. We didn't have health teachers. We had a new contract. It increased the amount of planning periods for teachers at all levels, K through 12, but really elementary is what we focused on. And in order to meet the planning time, the district had the money then, so they created 30 new health teacher positions in order to provide the planning time to meet a contractual agreement with Anchorage Education Association. So it's a broad misunderstanding to believe that health teachers always have been the only ones communicating with our students. They come into the classrooms once every 2 weeks on the opposite week of art, and they provided planning period for a teacher, so the health curriculum was designed as it's currently being laid out. The board did agree to cut the health teachers. We are redesigning the health curriculum, and it will be presented in a different way next year, but it is certainly still being presented. And for those of you who live in the budget world, which pretty much everyone in this room, I think everyone here will appreciate every single thing we put as a reduction had a group against it. We cut $200,000 for the dome for indoor soccer and spring sports. That ended up, there was mass emails out to parents saying students will be hurt, they'll lose college scholarships, and this was $200,000, right? So everything we tried to reduce had a large group that contacted board members saying that was the one and only thing that couldn't be cut, and anything else could be cut, but not that one. So it really was a struggle. It's a struggle for our school board to get to zero, because there's only one position in the entire budget that we did not have people come out against, and that was the administrative assistant at East High, because they had an additional AA. The assistant principal had gone away a couple years ago, but we kept the AA for a couple years. That was one position out of $20 million that we had to get to zero. That was the only thing that people did not get angry about. So, it's certainly a challenge, and I think our board took it on and honestly made the best they could with what was a real no-joke deficit. I'll take a break for a second and see if there's any questions so far. If not, I'll hand off to Andy to talk through general fund revenue.
Question. Jim, I have Carla, go ahead, you first.
Through the chair. Did the school board, I'm sure they did, but if they addressed the general public on where would you cut the budget if you had to? Did they get public input on that?
I'll tell you, that's a great question. We've been doing surveys for 5 years, and every time you do a survey, quite honestly, it's always the same. Just cut admin, but we want more teachers, and we want smaller class size, but make sure you cut admin. But quite honestly, the general public doesn't understand what admin is or how many people are actually included in admin. If you look at the state function district administration, which a lot of people assume that must be hundreds and hundreds of people, it's 27, and 8 of those 27 are school board members. And you can go to district admin support where there's about 250 plus, but 100 of those are IT, and we have 100 buildings and 100 IT. So
you know, just to keep education moving and to keep the district operating, it is, they really every time cut admin, cut the bloated salaries, they don't do anything, all we need is more teachers. But when you have 27, you can't cut the 7 school board members, not that I want to, I don't, if Dave's on the line. That gets you down to 19 people. You couldn't make up a $20 million deficit. You can't get there. There is, and you know, we have a slide later that shows this. You physically can't get there. It's like the state saying, don't cut health and human services and don't cut education, but we want to cut the state budget. If you look at those two categories, they're like 80%, 85% of the state's operational budget requirements if you take out PFD, right? So the state can't get there unless they cut education, health and human services, or PFD. They're in the same boat we're in because that's really what we have. We have more teachers than anyone else. 87% of our budget is personnel. So if you're looking at a large budget reduction, you can't not pay lease. You can't not have copiers. You can't not have a lot of things, fuel, buses, all those kind of things. But yeah, really they say cut admin, and then cut non-essential programs. And I will tell you that
Like Ignite?
Like Ignite. There's no such thing as a non-essential program to somebody.
Yeah.
No matter, really no matter what it is. We're the only district in the state that even had health teachers. And it has come up with letters to the assembly as if this is something that has been inculcated in education for decades, and there really is only one way to do it. We're the only ones who do it. We're the only ones who even have nurses at every school, librarians at every school, art or music at every school. You know, we really were. It was either cut class size or increase class size by cutting teachers, or in this case, we made an adjustment with health teachers and changing the way curriculum was done. But yeah, we always do surveys, and it always is, you know, have everybody's salary, and then there'll be enough. It's just, you know, and I don't fault anyone until I work for the school district. You know, I've worked in very large organizations of 15,000 plus, but I didn't know how the school district was set up. So, you know, obviously I would have asked the same thing, at least look at admin first. It's been cut, and you'll see it's been cut more than anything else percentage-wise over the last 10 years. And I'll hand it off to Andy for...
I do have another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Has the union been agreeable to working with you to help with this budget, or are they just still coming back and saying this is a contract?
Which union?
Well, we have 8 unions.
Any of them. Let's go with...
As we all know, unions exist to take care of dues-paying members.
Right.
That's their function.
But in the light of some people being cut from their jobs, have they backed down at all on some requirements?
I can answer it this way. The union knew when, if we didn't give them a 2% pay raise last year, that they had already made it clear they were going to go on strike. They knew if they gave a 2% pay raise that it would mean less teachers. And yet, they voted on it, right? So I don't know any polite way to answer your question.
Thank you.
By and large, there wasn't a whole lot of union opposition to the changes we made. I think 1 or 2 people got up and spoke about the one principal reduction we made. It wasn't really the union leadership that was coming up to push back against the changes we made.
I think you, though, were implying that they would be willing to accept less money for employees.
Well, there's also a little bit of fat in every union because they also have to take care of themselves. So there is. So I just didn't know what their. You talked about them implementing this longer prep time and some other things. I just, I wasn't sure if they were coming to the table and saying, "We know we're in trouble. Let's see what we can do to make it agreeable for everybody."
I can tell you they filled our boardroom every single board meeting last year up until the day the contract was signed. and every board meeting there was at least an hour to 3 hours of testimony by union members demanding increased. I don't recall at any one time any of the union members discussing looking at themselves.
Right. I guess to that point, our contractual requirement for our AEA staff is 4 hours per week for planning time. So as you see in our budget, we have like an hour late start proposed for early release. And that hour per week would be, 1 week would be for professional development, and the off week would be for planning time to make up for the time that they're missing as we reduce the number of health teachers we have. So that's one of the reasons we have that late start, and is to be able to meet that contract.
There's other advantages, though, to the 1 hour late start. There's disadvantages on the home life for people who one day every week have to provide for their children for an additional hour. But past union contracts have reduced the amount of face time that a principal can have with teachers to where they can only meet with them a couple times a month. So professional development has decreased as the need to change curriculum and improve the way we teach has increased because, frankly, our student population today is different than the student population 20 or 30 years ago. We have the most diverse school in the country in one of our schools. We have over 100 different languages being spoken at home. So as we're trying to teach teachers how to be able to reach and impact and affect learning at really this really broad group of students. They're not a composite board walking in the room where they all think and receive the same way, right? This extra hour, that's twice a month now, where we'll be able to help teachers develop their skills, become better teachers, because studies have shown it isn't really class size that directly is the most important thing to help a child learn. It's the quality of the teacher. The second most important thing is the quality of the principal and their ability to lead and be leaders. And so we've been able to work with the principals and start developing their skill sets. But this late start really will, every other week, give an additional hour where we can help teachers become better at learning how to connect with kids who aren't like them. I mean, no one is born with the ability to understand where everybody comes from and how to reach all these people. And this will give us an opportunity to work on those soft skills, which will hopefully make them better teachers in the end.
So I have a question also. From one of your early slides on page 2, the sort of structural deficit that ASD faces. Can you say more about what drives the structural deficit? Is that just because?
I can.
Yeah.
I can. It assumes, the main assumption is it assumes flat funding, which is all of our money is based off a base student allocation at state level, right?
Yeah,
it hasn't changed in 4 years? 5?
2017?
17?
Yeah.
18, 19, 20?
Right.
So
It doesn't
next year will be
adjust for
5 years.
inflation or.
So that hasn't changed. So inflation for us is about 2%. Our annual budget is somewhere around $570 million operation budget. So really, we get about a $12 million, roughly, big numbers, inflationary cost every year. So if they keep us at flat funding and everything else stays the same, then the first year you're 12 million behind. The second year you're 24 million behind. That time, 36, 48. And it's not really like that. As you cut your budget and you cut people, then the actual dollar amount would be a little bit less on those follow-on years. But it really shows that, as I talked to some of the legislators, I sold my 2004 Ford F-250 last summer. I bought a new truck. It cost a lot more than my 2004 Ford F-250 cost. So it's easy to say, I don't want your cost to increase, but healthcare, things like that go up. Insurance, just in 2 years, we had a 40% increase in liability insurance for the district. Not because ASD did anything wrong, but nationwide, the sexual assaults at schools, school violence, shooting, things like that have raised liability nationwide for school districts. So it's good to say, well, I don't want your costs to go up, so I want to keep you flat until you get better. But every year you have that heavy-handed deficit pushing down on you that you can't stop.
Right.
And that's what this slide shows, that in an imperfect world, we get no outside the formula money for the next 5 years. That's what the structural deficit would look like.
Sure. I want to acknowledge somebody just called in. Who just joined us?
Yeah, this is Dave Donnelly.
Oh, thanks for joining us, Dave.
Oh, it's not one o'clock.
Do you guys want to keep going, or do you have more?
He's heard it many times.
Right.
We can keep going.
Yeah, then please.
So I believe we're at the bottom of page or slide or page 4. The revenue, by and large, the local revenue, the increases in property taxes there is due to an increase in required local contribution, which is set based on Anchorage property values. So as property values go up, so do our required local contribution, and that makes up 1.5, 1.6 million of that. And about 200,000 is due to increased state revenue that allows the additional local contribution to go up as well. So about $1.8 million in property tax change that we're looking at. Fund balance usage went up by about $3.3 million. The district proposed $6 million of usage within their budget, and then the board added $2.3 million to bring back the IGNITE program to maintain that in its current form just for the next fiscal year. Interest earnings are expected to go up, although after this last week, we're just going to be hoping on that one. So it's stock market, if you've been watching that, it's been tanking, but hopefully by next fiscal year we'll start to see some gains and have our budget come through. The $100,000 increase in user fees, that is, as Mr. Anderson was discussing, restructuring the way that we tie activity waivers for sports fees. About $1 million of those user fees are for sports. So we'll be looking at that, but it's not a significant amount of revenue in this budget.
Yeah, I've got a question here.
Through the chair. So, and forgive me if you said this before I came in, but when we're talking about those waivers for user fees, are those primarily for like low-income students or that sort of thing? I'm just not familiar with the waivers.
They were designed for low income.
Okay.
And the more we dug into, what we found out was if you are a school that gets free lunches, Community Eligibility Provision Program, it's a federal program, the CEP schools, part of the law behind being allowed to have free food for all kids is parents don't turn in documentation showing their income, right? So there was really no way to validate in our system whether someone really should have gotten a waiver or not. So we really gave a lot of blanket waivers. We have now figured out in our system how to pull from other databases to give access to the administrative assistants that handle sports programs and activities, and they'll be able to really quickly look at, my son turned in a waiver, maybe signed by me, maybe not, maybe signed by my son, and she'll be able to come up and say, well, wait a second, it doesn't look like you would qualify for this. Now, principals will still be able to override because there's what someone made last year and their current, what's going on in their life, right? They may have just lost their job. They may have, going through cancer treatments and horrible things. So principals will be able to override it, but we think we're going to capture a chunk of what was really lost revenue.
Okay. Thanks for the explanation.
For state revenue, we have about $7.9 million increase in foundation funding. Largely, this is tied to our increase in students with intensive needs. As that's gone up considerably over the last few years, we're projecting it to go up even more. So most of that funding is due to just increases in the count of those students. And then the $8.4 million reduction in the operating grants, that's the HB 278 money that we got, 287 money that we got this year, that we are expecting to go away next year because it was only one-time funding. And then we have $150,000 we added this year. So we got the state education raffle where you can put in part of your PFD into a raffle. This was our allocation of the proceeds from that. So we did get, I think, a little over $140,000 this year. We expect it to go up a little bit next year. But that was something that we were not really planning on whenever we were building the FY20 budget. The only other large thing on this sheet is under federal revenue, a reduction of about $1.5 million for federal impact aid. This is money we get from the federal government in lieu of property taxes for the kids living on J-Bear predominantly. And just the number of students living on J-Bear has gone down, so the revenue tied to those students is going down as well.
Just want to acknowledge Caitlin Hepburn just for a minute.
Hi, apologies for being late.
Barring any questions, we'll go to page 5 of the two-sided deck on the top slide, titled District Inputs for FY21. Naturally, there are programs that we're still improving on, whether we have additional funding or not, by either changing the way that we provide that program to students, or potentially in some cases it does cost more money, like wireless access control and intercom upgrades. Those are a safety risk really for our schools. So we do have district inputs for next year that we're going to continue making progress on. We have a new math curriculum that we'll pilot next year at either 4 or 8 schools, and then a number of other things. If you look directly at the bottom, you'll see $8.3 million in fund balance. That's to keep PTR for K-6 to stay flat. And again, that's people to teacher ratio. We'll also limit changes of PTR at middle school and high school at a 0.25 increase, and retain Ignite. So a lot of people get confused on fund balance, and we can do a deep dive on that at a future meeting if someone really wants to see what our fund balance consists of. A lot of the general public doesn't realize that we're required by the municipality to retain about $25 million just so we get good bond ratings when we sell bonds. So part of our 10% of expenses that we can roll over by state law to retain as fund balance, a significant chunk of that really is to have good bond debt. 8.3 million in fund balance is the most we've used at any time in the recent past to help avoid cutting 60 teacher positions. Was the first $6 million, and then the rest was to save Ignite, and then a couple other minor things. So it's a significant amount of fund balance, and the board understands that it's not sustainable to think that we can use that much fund balance multiple years in a row, because at some point we wouldn't have an emergency savings in the event of a crisis. Next slide is the FY21 expenditures by state function. You can see on here, really looking at the bottom up, where the bulk of our money goes. It really does go towards instruction, special education instruction. Operation and maintenance and plant includes utilities and all those other heat and oil and all of those other kinds of functions. In fact, utilities for us is just under $20 million a year, just to give you a perspective on that bar chart. So if you look at all of the ones in brown, those are the functions that allow our schools to operate on a daily basis at all, from cleaning and sanitizing to lights being turned on. And really, it represents almost 97.5% of all of our revenue really does go toward operating those buildings. And it goes back to your question earlier about when someone says, well, why don't you just cut $50 million out of admin and you'll have it? It's because it never was there. Mm-hmm. It doesn't exist to cut those kind of large chunks. Really, our money does go to have schools operate. So, and then you can see across the bottom, other than personnel, the other chunks in percentages of our budget costs. And barring any questions, if we go to page 6, top slide, is the staffing level reductions from FY13 to 21. By state function, you'll see that support services instruction
That's professional learning, curriculum, those kind of positions. That's been cut at the district level more than the bulk of them were at district level. When those positions were cut, another domino effect of cutting any centralized activity is you maybe before had 2 people doing something for 90 schools, and now if you cut those 2 positions, all of the work goes to the 90 schools, and it's really ineffective because now you have 90 principals trying to do a little bit of something as opposed to 1 or 2 people doing it for the whole district-wide, the coordination, synchronization. But that's kind of what that means when you cut 27%. The next one is district admin. That would be the next highest percentage-wise. Option maintenance, instruction. So there have been a lot of questions that say, well, you cut teachers by 13.5%, but what about all these other functions? And I'll just quickly give a little bit of example. One, special ed only increases. It's our growth industry in the district. Those costs only increase so far every year. But when you look at school admin, you can't have 14% of the schools without a principal, or 14% of the schools without a nurse to make the bar chart look pretty and make it match the 13.5% of teachers. It just doesn't work that way for all of the other functions. And then about half of the teacher reductions were made because of lower enrollment over time, and not because of cuts due to increasing class size. So it's a little bit of a it's difficult to brief in a large public room as to why you don't just cut everything else, and it goes back to if you have one BPO for the building and you cut the one BPO, there's no one to open the doors in the morning and clear the ice, and so you can't just flat cut things because the world doesn't work that way. And I put some data numbers on this chart showing the number of students that declined over that time period, and so we have reduced about 6.8% of students, but 9% of staff. Again, going back to the bulk of our money really does go towards people. Can you take the next one?
This next slide just shows our PTR. We did increase PTR in middle and secondary school, or middle and high schools, by a quarter of a student, so 30.25. It is just a staffing metric to say how many students per teacher. So we increased that a little. I think it saved about, I want to say around 8 positions in total, or eliminated about 8 positions in total to increase that. We're maybe running kind of short on time, so we'll go through these fairly quickly. The next slide, page 7 at the top. These are just staff allocations for elementary schools that are not part of the PTR formula. Our standard is to have a librarian, and there's 2 office admin, a BPO in every school, and then for every classroom have a 3.5-hour kindergarten TA in every kindergarten classroom. So this encompasses, we did redesign the health instruction, we talked about that earlier. 19 FTE were lost out of elementary just due to enrollment decreases. And then we made some other tweaks with the other specialists, art, health, PE. So a net loss among specialists in elementary schools was about 7 FTE. For middle schools, we increased the PTR by 0.25. It eliminated about 3.6 teachers due to enrollment, and I think it was 2 or so, 2.8 for the 2.25 PTR increase. And we got rid of the library assistants. It turns out a lot of those schools weren't even hiring the library assistants because they didn't really need them. So we were able to get rid of a lot of vacant positions. And the ones that were filled, we've increased the library assistants in elementary schools as well to help cover some of that planning time as we're having librarians do more to allow teachers to have some of that planning time back. So we did move some library assistants over to elementary schools.
So I'm going to do a little bit of a time check here because we also have another presentation on property appraisals. So
we can go really quick from this point on. In fact, we can move if you'd like to
to school board amendments, because I did brief the bulk of this at the last BAC.
Yeah. Can we talk
So
amendments then?
if we go to school board amendments, you'll see that the school board did approve adding $3.9 million if we get a state legislative grant, which currently is not one of the bills in Juneau, but who knows? And another $68 million if we got a state legislative grant to bring class size down to the optimal level. And these two are really placeholders. We can't spend it if we don't get it. We had something similar to this in this current year's budget. We didn't get anything from the state, so obviously we didn't implement it. But it does show the state that the need is out there, even if they're not funding it.
Is it so it's a symbolic act in some ways?
Unless, without legislation, yes. It's certainly a recognition that we're not properly funded or optimally funded. They did choose, and we talked about the fund balance, and then reduce district admin by 1%. Plus, we started this year to get checks from the PFD lottery. And our first check, I think, was $147,000 this year. And we weren't sure how that was going to work when that law really first got passed. But, it's a little bit of money, so it helped save a security position.
So we originally proposed cutting 3 security positions. The board added those 3 back, and then an extra one at Service High School.
So, really, that's the brief. The next slide is really one of my opening slides.
Questions do you guys have that weren't answered? Yeah, Tasha.
So, for Dave on the phone, this is Tasha Hodge. Have you guys put together a budget of what it would take for us, what kind of funding for our students to be succeeding? Like if I go to the data dashboard and see the measures where we're measuring kind of the negative things where kids are not meeting grade level reading or on track to graduate, like those numbers I think are disappointing. Like 30 or 42% of the kids are not on track to graduate high school that are freshmen. And I'm like, why not? So how can we...
We haven't put together a specific budget like that, but when you look at the school board's budget, that $68 million to reduce class size to 15 in grades K through 3, and then 25 and 4 through 12. I mean, that's really what's going to move the needle, is having things like that where you have more time to work with the students individually to increase your performance, and have the mental health counselors in there too to be able to address some of the other home life issues that they may be having, and direct them towards social services to be able to accommodate some of those other issues they might have that might be prohibiting them from learning at the pace they should be.
Andy, thank you. Yeah, thank you for that.
Hold on a sec, David. This is Lance. We're going to turn you up. We can barely hear you.
Okay, Lance, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
I understood the question to be to the board perspective, and I believe Andy pretty much accurately represented that. But those, they call them budget wedges, these requests for additional funding that would not actually be in the budget unless they were provided by the state, reflect the FICUS Odom ideal class size projection, which would, of course, allow great improvement in the amount of instruction and extra attention to be provided to those students to address issues like reading deficiency, Tasha.
Thank you. What other questions do we have on school budget?
I did. Oh.
Carla, yeah.
Through the check. The school board, or the school district has made recommendations on the budget. The school board overrides them in certain times, certain situations. I'm assuming you don't make your recommendations willy-nilly. You really put some thought into what can be cut or what needs to increase. So I wish I could remember where I was going with that damn question.
I bet it was good though.
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering, you know, how much of your recommendation they really truly consider, or, I mean, do you, yeah, I really don't remember.
The vast majority of the budget was approved as recommended. The reality is we had 40 to 50 people working hundreds of hours to pull this budget together. It was a recommendation. But the school board, by design, represents the constituents of Anchorage, the adults and the other interest groups that they have to take into consideration when they make final amendments or changes. And I mean, that's normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I could comment on that too from the board's point of view. The board gave priority to the administration, and the top priority was what was the result of our surveys of the community, and that was that the top priority should be class size. So the board, consistent with that community input, asked the administration to prepare a budget that protected as much as possible class size, which the administration did, but subject to overwhelming public testimony and interest and communications from the public, the board tweaked that a little bit based on the input that we got from the public. And that seemed like a very reasonable and process that worked just the way it should.
Yeah, I think my thing is we all know that throwing more money at it doesn't seem to be solving the issue of test scores and graduation rates. So, I mean, I just don't know how much consideration we put into what makes us different in Alaska than other school districts, successful school districts anywhere else, and how we can realign rather than, I mean, I think every parent thinks it's class size. It's just like every person in the community thinks it's administration that's eating up all the money. I just wish we could get a good balance, because I feel like throwing more money at it doesn't help the situation.
Well,
the reality is we're not throwing more money at it for year after year after year after year. All we do is start the budget cycle with what's the next cut.
Right. Well, no. What I mean is most people think that you need more money to make education better, and maybe that's the case.
But more money hasn't been the problem. I think we've seen, you know, the budgets are in real terms are shrinking. So I think that's probably the bigger issue. I think we are going to have to move on to our next agenda item.
Well, could I just comment on the board's perspective on that comment?
Yes.
The board spends a huge amount of time looking at that issue. What makes us different? What makes Alaska different? And there's some very obvious distinctions. One of which is we have the shortest school year combined with the shortest school day of any state in the nation. So that over a life of a K through 12 student, their time in our schools, they're receiving something like 1.5 to 2 years less actual instruction time as students in other states are receiving. And that's a big factor. It's not the only factor, but that's just one of many.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this is a very big subject that unfortunately we probably won't solve right now. But thanks to Jim and Andy and Dave for joining in and for giving us this overview. I think there's a lot of good information here, and so we appreciate that very much. I think that the next item on our agenda is about BAC priorities. Was this something you wanted to talk about?
Before we do that, let me just remind. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Dave. I'm gonna talk just a little bit about what I think you guys, where the process is. So the assembly is going to get a briefing on the school budget, something probably similar to this next Wednesday afternoon. I thought it was going to be today, but next Wednesday. I think at 3 o'clock, right, Andy, or something?
I think it's 3:30.
I'll send you guys the invitation. So that will be, the assembly will get that. The assembly is scheduled to act on the school district budget on the 24th of March. What I would ask the BAC to consider is, based on the presentation, based on the material, right now, is there anything that you disagree with from the board's from the Budget Advisory Commission's perspective, that we could start drafting a resolution based on some of the talking points here? I think that some of Andy's and Jim's comments, and I also think some of Dave's comments are very, they present a solid picture based on from where the administration has come from and where the board has come from, where they've come to a balanced budget that they have to come up with. Whether or not you want to say something about the state legislative grants, that would be, how you feel about those. But if what I would recommend is I will draft something based on this. I will ask Andy and Jim to look at it. I will send it to you guys to take a look at, because we're not going to get together before the assembly does, and we'll put it together in that way. Unless you think that they haven't done a good job and they haven't considered something drastic that you would want me to include. But I do think that based on the briefing that Jim gave last month, the changes that the board made based on the comments they've heard from the public, the budget's built kind of a balance between the resources they have, the tasks that they have, and the surveys they receive. They do face a challenge like we do, and I think they had to make some tough choices. But I think that's where I think you guys need to go. But if you want to do something different, let me know, and I can work with Andy and Jim to craft it and get it out there so that I have it a week from Friday, so that I can get it to the assembly for their consideration. So I would ask that you think about doing that unless you have a serious objection otherwise.
Okay.
All right?
Did you want to, so it's so we need to get a resolution, and how do you want to get input from us on a resolution? Is that
So let me draft it.
Yeah.
Let me draft it. Let me send it to all of you. Then you reply just to me. Okay? Don't CC all. Don't reply to all. And then I will edit, and then I will go and I will send it to Nolan and to Alyssa, and then make sure that there's nothing, that those gentlemen are comfortable with it, and then I'll get you to sign it or Alyssa to sign it, and then I'll get it to the assembly. So again, thanks guys. I think it is a ton of work.
Thank you.
Dave, do you have any other suggestions on how the BAC could do something for the assembly?
No, that sounds like a very reasonable way to proceed.
Okay, thank you. So I will draft that and get that to you guys Monday.
Okay. And I personally would say it's like one piece of language that might be good in there, and I don't know if the others agree it or not, but something about the base student allocation not keeping up with real costs, right? It's a nominal dollar amount that loses value every year.
I was going to start with the structural deficit and some of the points that Jim mentioned.
Right.
The ingredients that they're challenged with every single year.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
I
all.
also think that as a community, we should never forget the importance of getting an updated district cost differential in the education formula, because Anchorage is losing tens of millions of dollars because it has not been updated for like 15 years. That would increase its Anchorage share of the total state spending. It wouldn't necessarily increase the state spending, but we would get a fairer share where we should be within that spending.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would follow up on Mr. Donnelly's suggestion there. The current district cost allocation, I believe, gives a 5% premium to the Mat-Su borough. If you look at the latest OCONUS data, which the military uses for setting costs, the borough is actually 5% lower in operating costs or living costs than Anchorage, and so that has not been updated for it's almost 20 years now. The other thing is, Lance, when do you think the timing of this is?
So the assembly, I would like to get it to the assembly. The regular agenda items are due tomorrow. I will do an addendum to the agenda a week from tomorrow. So I need to have your guys. Otherwise, it's a late on the table. I really like to get it the weekend before they act on the 24th of March.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I believe the release date will be the 17th, but I'm just finishing up a big project for the Children's Trust, and the amount of state money going into education broadly, not just K-12 education, but education broadly, is down about 7% in real terms. I mean, we're not spending more money; we're spending less money in real terms, and that, I believe, the release date on that is the 17th. That might be a usable, fresh data source to toss in.
Okay.
But anyways.
All right, then on BAC priorities, is that
what I would like you guys to do, I sent you a copy of the report. Hope you had a chance to look at it. I sent it maybe a month ago. Okay, I didn't bring more copies of it. The back side of it had a list of your priorities. I just wanted you guys to agree to those things and just basically say, yeah, these are our priorities for 2020, and then just sort of formalize it in that form. And that's what I would like you. That's an action item to make sure that it's there. Obviously, if stuff comes up, we'll adjust, but that's where we're going to focus our efforts.
Okay.
Stormwater, revenues, MLMP proceeds, school district budget, our budget. I can't remember everything else that was in there. But anyway, I'm going to, unless there's an objection, I'm going to go ahead and use those as the priorities for you guys for 2020. And so maybe that's the best way to do it.
These are the ones we put together in the strategic meeting?
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was the last page.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Then with that, I think we can move on to property appraisal. This is one of my favorite presentations that we get periodically.
Don't get your hopes up.
Jack, do you want to be up here?
Just being modest.
That can work too, yeah.
Yep. Only because that way the recording can hear you.
Great.
And introduce yourself and Jerry.
Yeah. Is it okay if I use the projector?
It is totally okay if you use the projector. While Jack's getting set up, if you guys want a cookie, now's the time to do it. Carla didn't bring coffee this time. Oh, she will next time. Does anybody want a cookie? I'm serving.
From now on, you're showing up with a pot of coffee.
Dark, but that's okay. It'll work.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Okay.
I already took one.
I don't have any Gia cookies this time. I'm practicing.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay.
So, is it
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock?
Make it
So
happen.
I will be very quick. So, my name is Jack Adamus. I'm with Property Appraisal. So, what we'll do for this is we do the annual evaluation. So, this is really just going to be about some of the things that we've done this last year. Then it's going to look at the 2020 values, and then I'll be quick and wrap it up. So, we'll get going from that. First, thank you for your time, and thanks for letting us present. First thing here is just really what property appraisal does. A lot of people think we are there to collect taxes, but at the end of the day, you can see at the bottom what we do is we administer exemptions and we value property. Really, it makes our job sound too easy. So we do a year-round look at exemptions. I will expand a little bit more on the exemption review update from last year. I'm sure some of you remember that. Year-round, we also inspect property by municipal code. We are required to inspect property every 6 years. Then we have January 1st. That's our lien date. That's when the value of the property, the snapshot, is set. As you can see here, we are in the thick of our appeal season right now. Once that gets wrapped up towards the summer, we get into the valuation analysis to look at the next year. That would be 2021. Finally, new construction. That's also something I'll expand on. We always try to pick up new construction towards the end of the year. Again, we want to be mindful of that January 1 snapshot. So, looking at that, total taxable value by tax year spanning from all the way back from 1980 to now for tax year 2020. This year, taxable value is up slightly. We're working on the projection. We're still honing it in. But I also wanted to mention here, too, which I think is interesting, starting to show now what the impact is, what happened in 2018 from the residential exemption. You can see the total taxable value did tick down in 2018. Again, that residential exemption did effectively double. Was 10% to 20,000. It's now 20% up to 50,000. And again, you can see it's slightly going up a little bit. So, examining this a little bit more, we have total value. $47 billion is roughly our total value for this year. That's comprised of residential at 56, commercial at 23, personal property at 6, and then the two yellow slices are your fully exempt property. So 10% being your government, and then your non-government at 5%, which is going to be your churches, charitable, etc. But the pie does change when you start to look at the taxable value. At the end of the day, that's what is paying for government services. Residential now is 61% 31 for commercial, and personal property now at 8. So that's taking out all exemptions, including partial exemptions.
Does that set of ratios change much over the year? Is that pie over the years, or is that pie the pie?
And I think when we had when there was the change in the residential exemption, again, that was huge. That was what, almost $1 billion, Jerry, roughly, of additional exempt property. It did change that a little bit, and we did some kind of analysis, of hypothetical analysis. It kind of shifted about 3 to 4%, excluding the gas tax, because that was another thing, to non.
But if I went back to, like, say, I moved here in 2003, right? 2003, 2004, I pull that up, still basically 60-40. I mean,
that's a good question. I definitely am not confident to say right now what that would be.
Okay.
I could go along with it.
But
I've been watching it as the chief appraiser, so.
It just kind of,
This is about what it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
he's here to bail me out. I told him he's my parachute today.
Institutional knowledge.
Oh, it's a huge. Taxable values. So looking at the same pie chart here at the right, so that's 6131.8 is here as well. So residential, so just kind of slicing and dicing the data a little bit more, what's comprised of, and you can see there's single-family homes is the bulk of that value there. It makes sense. We have a lot of single-family homes in Anchorage. If you look at commercial, again, that 31% of the pie, it's a little bit more flat there, but industrial is the largest one there, 3.1 billion. And we do have a lot of industrial. Our list is what we classify as industrial. And then down to personal property, 8%, you can see the bulk of the value there, $2.7 billion for business. And I'll probably talk about that here in a little bit more. So about a quarter of the total value is exempt. So taking a look at that, we have mandatory at the top, so that mandatory meaning that's what the state statute requires us to do. First, there are senior disabled veterans. That's the first $150,000 off of your assessed value if you do qualify for those. And if you are 65 or older or disabled military, by all means, go ahead and you may qualify. $2.5 billion. And then you have municipality, federal, education, state. Again, those are all your fully exempt government. And then you have your several charitable religion, etc. Down at the bottom, the optional or the local, so that's what the municipality has chosen to adopt. Residential, you can see there $2.2 billion, by far the largest for there. Personal property, that's a $20,000 business exemption, and then charter school, relatively small. Couple things for new property appraisal this last year. We had a few things. I'll just briefly talk about some of them. The most I'll talk about is exemption review effort. We also have a computer system mass appraisal upgrade going on, and we also have some new ordinances that's happened this last year, calendar year 2019. Exemption review. So our goal for this, the end of the day, is to make sure that we have equity with the municipality with exemptions. So we want to make sure that people who are qualified for an exemption receive it, and the opposite, if you're not qualified for it, we want to make sure that you don't receive it. Before the team, we had one person that was a shining star. She's sadly since retired. She was reviewing about 6,000 exemptions a year. One person show like that would have taken about 15 years to do a full cycle. A little too long. We have a lot of exemptions. So what we did is we hired a team late 2019. We also paired and been working with the I-team downstairs. They've been very helpful of giving us a little bit of a technology boost to our business practice. This really is going to be a one-time effort. It should take about 15 months to get us back up to speed to something that is reasonably equitable. So far, what we've done, some action items since then, aside from getting the team up to speed, which obviously takes time, we sent out about 1,250 senior letters of people who currently receive a residential exemption that is 65 or older, and we said, hey, you might be qualified for this, and we did get a lot back. So we've gotten about, of that, we've gotten about 800 back, and over 90% of those, over 95% of those have been qualified actually. Where we qualify, as you can see in that green, about 766. And of course, we did receive a good chunk that was not received or had no response. But that's not the only thing we've done, so that's kind of the proactive that we've been doing. But we've also certainly been reviewing current exemptions. And for 2020, we have and will continue to flag for follow-up with exemptions. So far, we removed about 87 exemptions because people were not qualified for that. That when we do review, we are spanning back up to 6 years. One of the ways I like to think about exemptions is, yes, it's a great savings, but think of this like a contract. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with that great savings, and so if there's anything that happens, you change your living status, by all means you have to let property appraiser know. So it is still up to the property owner to let us know. But we do have a lot more exemptions to be following up on. So far we have a list of low-hanging fruit of 3,000 that we hope to get to this year. So it is big.
So if I could ask, so you've got this one-time push to review exemptions, and then after that it goes back to status quo. Is it going to are you going to have a new backlog build up at that point, or do you feel like this big push helps you get on top of it to like review those ongoing?
Great question. I was actually recently talking to the CFO about this, saying, hey, we got into this position because we just didn't have the resources to be able to review these annually. So once we get up to speed, this team, I'd like to have some type of resource dedicated into perpetuity that would help us make sure that we don't ever get this backlog again. So by no means be the resource we have now of a Team 3 focus on this, but we do have to have a plan going forward once we get to that, exactly what you're talking about. What that looks like is right now starting to make a shape here. So, but yeah, that's an excellent question, and I'm asking the same question now. CAMA, Computer Assisted Mass Appraisal. That's our program that we're using. It was implemented in the early 1980s, so it's slightly dated. You imagine what a car looks like in the early 80s. Project was approved in 2017 by the Assembly. We did start this last year. Tyler Technologies is the vendor that we're using. They are formerly CLT. CLT stands for Coal Layer Trumbull. They're the ones that implemented our system back in the 80s. So yes, there's a lot of changes, but it is an upgrade, and there's a lot of fields that are basically the same. So we're optimistic. Right now we're in the assess and define stage. It's about a 2.5-year project, and once this project's done, the municipality will be going off the mainframe, and we will be saving, don't quote me on this, take it with a grain of salt, about $1 million is what we'll be saving operating costs annually because of that. So that's going on. Also, impact of the ordinances. So I talked about this a little bit. We did have 4 ordinances. I'm not going to go into detail of this, but we did have correct assessment, which was largely because of earthquakes. We did certainly adjust a lot of properties for that. I think the total adjustment was well over $60 million between correct assessments and appeals over the last year of 2019. We also had some new ordinances as well, as you can see, downtown housing, natural disaster, which is allowing for commercial properties, and then also new subdivision exemption. So there's certainly things going on there, and you can see the new applications that have been coming in and the interest there. Yes?
What is the exemption for the newly subdivided property?
Basically for that is right now you pay, you got this big plot of land, and you subdivide it to, let's say, for example, 10 parcels. The value is going to significantly jump up. The goal is to not pay any more taxes for 5 years than what you
left it.
Precisely, as you left it as is. So it's a way to try to encourage more development and
more
availability.
parcels on the market by removing,
And that's anywhere within
penalty for having them.
Anywhere within the muni or just downtown?
Anywhere in the municipality.
Just check it.
Yes, that's correct. On to 2020 values here. So starting with new construction, what happened? I think the first thing you can see there, that total at the bottom right is, yeah, things were down for new construction this last year. And then if you look at the residential, it was actually up a little bit, 4%. But commercial obviously significantly down at 40%. And in general, commercial does have a little bit more of a higher variance from year to year. What we saw for tax year 2019 is we had a couple of big projects come online and finish. There was the Oldham distribution, there was the Alaska Airlines hangar, and then we just did not see anything coming online for tax year 2020. So there's inherently variance there. And if you take a look at this as well, breaking it down by property type and then also the total, which is the bar here, you can see about 2017 to 2020, we've been hanging around the 200. This is obviously one of the lower years, but $200 to $250 million new construction range. So, including new construction here as well in this table summary. Residential up about 1.1, commercial up about 0.6 here. We also have the total, including, again, new construction, 1.2% up. Again, the $35.1 billion. But if you take out new construction, so just looking at existing property, which is what we often take a look at, residential on average went up about a little more than 0.5%. Commercial, you can see there, effectively flat, down just 0.1%. Personal property, we have an asterisk there. It's really using last year's data because they don't file. Businesses don't file until the summer. And then we also have exempt property up by 3%. The reason why exempt property is up 3% is we've been having a continual long-going project to try to tick and tie our exempt property a little bit better. So we've been really trying to get a better profile on those properties. So it's just an effort on our behalf there.
Are more people aging into the senior exemption? Is that part of the issue?
No, so this is really going to be like your fully exempt property. Like we're saying, maybe we, we're incorrect on a municipal building, and so we want to just make sure that we have that in profile, and make sure that our all property is as accurate as we can be. Overall, 0.8% increase for the existing property. And if you just going to do a little bit breaking down by the property types, residential, commercial, and personal property, very quick. Again, increase of 1.1%, including new construction, 26.2 for the total. As with percents and percent changes and averages, the devil's in the detail. But you can see here, at the top there, single-family residence, up about 0.6%. Again, the bulk of them, as we saw there, bulk of the value is those single-family homes. If you look at it down below, that table down below, we also have by assembly district. Downtown, we did see go down ever so slightly. And then we have Eagle River, East Anchorage, and South Anchorage. They vary about 0.8 to 1%.
How far does the downtown district go? The south?
Downtown district goes, I believe down, I forget exactly where it is. We should look it up.
I think it's right before the Sheraton is the east wall of it.
And South Edition? And does it go to South Edition?
I don't think that.
No, it doesn't. It stops at the 9th.
At 9. Okay.
Yeah, and some of this too, because we were kind of picking our brains or scratching our head. I think some of this too is just some of it is older housing stock in this area too.
Because go to South Edition, you're seeing people buy the single-family homes and put in like the duplexes or fourplexes that are going in that area. I was wondering if that was driving some of this, but
yeah, I don't think as much, but that's a good point.
And this is in real dollars, not inflation, right? Or this is in nominal dollars, not real numbers.
This is these are percent changes, so it's looking at nominal percent change,
right,
not we're not.
So everything's losing value.
Everything's losing value relative to inflation, yeah.
I often ask that same question, actually. It is something to consider. Residential data, we do track listings, but we don't directly impact the value of it. It's kind of a good gut check for us. This last year, we had about, for Anchorage, there was about 2,850 some sales that occurred. That's really almost the same that happened in 2018. So very similar as far as the number of transactions that occurred. We're a non-disclosure state. Typically, we get about 30% disclosed to us. We also do use the last 3 years of sales, again, just because we need that additional data to try to estimate the population. I'm going to commercial property here. Commercial property, again, including new construction, up 0.6% for a total of 10.73%. If you take out new construction and slice and dice it by property type, you can see a few things going on. Fourplexes were down about 0.5%. One of the things that we were seeing with fourplexes and a few things, rental rates did reduce a little bit this last year. Also, vacancy also reduced. So it's kind of an interesting year for fourplexes, and also apartments. You can see that's down slightly too. Retail, we increased about 0.5% this last year. Retail effectively, for the market reasons, flat at best, but we were reviewing some of our information and made an equity move on that. Office, flat. Industrial, 0.2, effectively flat. Hotels increased about 2.1%. Hotels are on the income approach, meaning we look at what the hotels have for income and try to do a, yes?
Yeah, no, finish your sentence and then.
So income approach is really looking at what the property gets for a basically net income, and then we try to capitalize that and try to derive a value off of that. Revenues increased for hotels this last year, so that was interesting to see. And I'm not sure if you saw, probably Treasury also probably said something very similar.
Through the chair, Jack, you raised a really interesting point, right? Which is that hotels are off the income method. Right, and you could actually do the same thing on office space where it's the income method. You were able to provide some color about residential rental rates. Do you have any additional color about commercial lease rates, particularly with respect to office space?
Not too much. The one thing that we've been noticing for the general trend, it seems like, and I think it's kind of dissipating, is people seem to be able to do a little bit more negotiation. Mm-hmm. And so there wasn't so much. So what we're seeing is maybe price per square foot for rentals. There's, again, the devil in the details of maybe there's some incentives, some perks into that. I've heard for a little while that maybe some people were paying the same rent, but then we're getting a better quality place. So I think.
Or getting money for tenant improvements or something like that.
Yep, yeah. Some TI. So I think there's certainly some things going, but I don't think it's as transparent as we would wish. So I don't know if that helps answer your question, or maybe just verifies that.
Yeah, lets me know where you guys are. And,
sure.
Right, and that it's not as transparent as any of us wish.
Correct.
And do you guys track vacancy rates for like office space or?
We don't directly track it. What we do is just make sure that we're aware of what any information is. So if we get something from an appraisal, that's great. We're always data hungry. Reports, if there's anything. BOMA is very helpful. So a lot of gut checks like that. Also, I just want to mention land here did increase this last year 2%. Largely, again, this one is for equity reasons. We didn't increase land for quite some time. And yes, we understand things are it's not a hot market right now, but the data was suggesting that maybe we were a bit low. Moving on, personal property. Personal property, as you can see, is comprised of many different things, including mobile homes and pipelines and machinery and equipment and you name it, anything that's basically not real property, not including intangible value, of course. So for 2019 compared to 2018, like I said before, we don't have 2020 data available yet. Increase about 1% last year. I think this year what we're starting to see is it might have a slight increase this year as well. So we'll see. We're cautious about that as well. But here's a chart showing a little bit more breakdown of what the value and where it is comprised of. Overall, businesses account for well over 90% of the actual total value. Oil and gas, about 5%. That's assessed by the state, not us. And then we also have mobile homes. And what's interesting is little less than half of the total account for personal property is mobile homes. But as you can see here, the sliver of actual value to that is relatively small.
What is the oil and gas property that is taxable? Is it, I mean,
Yeah, so
where is it?
basically what it is it's inventory that's sitting in Anchorage as of January 1 that's destined to the North Slope
It's
or down
product
south.
inventory.
Product inventory.
Largely product inventory.
Yep.
Okay.
And again, as of January 1, so maybe January 2nd it's gone, but we captured it, and so.
Yeah,
go
I mean,
from there.
I'm thinking like, you know, if you go to the North Slope, I mean, clearly they have pipes and
Right.
buildings and that sort of stuff. We don't really have that here, so thanks for
Yep.
clarifying as product inventory.
So just a little bit here, quick. I just want to, like I said in the beginning, we are in the thick of our appeal season. And so here you can see a chart spanning 2004 to today, tax year 2020. And you can see the number of appeals and the number of corrected assessments. Corrected assessments, just to let you know, is basically we say, oh yeah, okay, you had a value that we gave you, early January valuation notice. We're going to actually correct that. We're going to revise it and then send you a new valuation notice. But anyways, as you can see, 2019 obviously was a busy year for us. Largely that was earthquakes. This year, very promising. We have a pretty low appeal count as well as a corrected assessment. So that is a positive thing for us and our staff that have been busy and can maybe take a breath of air. So I know I've been trying to zip through this and chat really quick, but just a quick summary of everything that I talked about. Big thing, new construction, again, down about 16%, but the taxable value is up a little bit this year. We are doing a projection. That projection will probably have a slight difference than that. Existing real property, commercial, again, effectively flat, down just 0.1%, and residential up a little more than 0.5%. That is all I have. I do appreciate your time and good questions. If you have any more questions, by all means, ask them now, or even I can hang out afterwards.
I don't know if you have this top of mind, but do you recall what the average assessed single family home is in Anchorage?
I do have that. It's right around
365.
Right around.
I guess.
365, you said?
Oh, I think it was.
I predict a lot.
I do have it here.
The swag.
It's my.
I just wanted to see if you were closest to the retail price without going over.
Oh, right. Well, it depends on how you slice and dice that data here. But what we do have is average assessed value of single family homes, 360, 394.
Ooh, you went over.
Price is right, well, sorry.
The MLS average sale price, so that's the sale price, not assessed value, 375,076. Yeah, and then of course, as you probably know, averages are what they are averages.
I think we should start taxing views, so all you hillside people are going to get.
Well,
That's right.
I hate to say it, but we already do account that if you got a great view,
That's part of the value.
Hey.
it does affect value, and we do account for
So
that.
if I have a
Heavy
really,
curtains.
if I have a really poor view, can I get a break?
No,
Are you
because
gonna
that's
get the
average.
next time?
I've been to your house, your view's
Request a
not
review
terrible.
of your assessment.
No, my views are not terrible. Jack sent me this presentation. I will forward it to you guys, so just so that you have this with you. He sent it to me yesterday, the day before yesterday, I think, and I didn't get a chance to forward it to you, so my bad. One of the things that's important about this presentation that Jack's team will be sending to me at the end of this month is the new construction, the assessed valuation, because that information helps us set the tax cap.
Yeah.
Two probably most important pieces that we get from Jack's team is setting the tax cap. And then we get a lot of other information from public finance on investments and from Treasury on revenues, which we already have. All of those things help us build an adjusted 2020 budget. But this information is critical to setting the mill rate. This is also the information that we provided to the school district when they prepared their budget on the proposed estimated mill rate changes for their budget. When we set the mill rates and set out the tax bills, we're going to use the approved budget from the school district, and then this one. The school districts, they use half of last year's and half of this year's assessed valuation, combine them to get one mill rate, because that's how their budget's built. It's on their budget is on fiscal year, not a calendar year. So that's why it's a little bit different. But anyway.
So I take it construction isn't taxed until it's placed in service, correct?
New construction is captured as of January 1. So let's say that you have a home that's half complete as of January 1. We will say it's 50% complete.
Oh, gotcha.
So it's as of January 1, whatever it is in every condition.
Okay.
So it's no different than if you have a fully, a property, a home that's 100% complete, but it's really old and has some major deferred maintenance. We're going to, profile that, as it would be market value.
So if you tear off your siding, Carla, you might get taxed.
Well, actually, ironically, my house has been under construction for like 3 years, but we're in a dispute, and it's not usable, livable space because it's enclosed, but it's not livable, and it has no insulation, hasn't anything, and he's taxing me on it. I'm like, damn it, I can't even use that space.
Well, I'll be curious to see, what that.
But it's been like 3 years, so you're probably driving by going, hey, 3 years. I'm not waiting any longer for you to get that done.
See, thank you very much for that presentation. So it's one I always enjoy. When so next up, Lance, did you have more to say? We don't have an assembly report. I don't think we have anything here, but.
So on the department assignments, just really quick, I've only had 2 comments from senior leadership about department assignments, and that is to make sure that none of the BAC members have a conflict of interest on your day jobs compared to the departments that you're digging in. I think the only 2 closest ones might be Tasha, just because of her regular business, because she's going to look at the health department. But frankly, that might give her a little unique quality about what we're looking into. Jimmy, who's going to be looking at real estate. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that one there kind of raised some eyes. But other than that, I think it's Jonathan.
I coach within the health department. I coach senior leadership at the health department.
Okay. So if you guys are running into that situation, take that in mind and recuse yourself or look at something else to do. Other than that, I talked to Jed. I think I talked to Tasha a little bit about getting you guys some structured comments and questions so that you're all using the same general questions as you go in. I haven't sent those to you yet because I haven't prepared them yet. The department heads know you're coming, and so they know that it'll be over the next 3 months. So that's what's going on right now. Nobody picked property appraisal, Jack.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Sorry,
Jack.
I did make my appointment next week to meet with planning.
Oh, good.
I'm meeting with them, but I can't.
I can ask you
Josh,
probably
I just
just as
didn't
many
have
back.
Josh has been in Hawaii for 3 weeks.
Probably learn more.
Yeah. And then the last thing I have really quick on first quarter budget revision. So we at OMB are we have all of the department submissions proposed. We are now pulling in the end of 2019. We have closed that. The expenditures for 2019 in the kind of the 5 major areas, we underspent by a couple $1 million, which is good. The fund balance number is not going to be available. The fund balance number is, once we meet all of our reserves, do we have any money left over? Alex, the CFO, has basically said you don't have any because we spent part of our reserves for earthquake. But we also know we're going to recover for those. So that's a piece of that. The mayor will be making recommendations on first quarter budget revisions the 24th through the week of the 24th, and then we will be giving it to the assembly on the 14th of April. They will then act on it 2 weeks later on the 28th. So at your April meeting, we'll be talking about first quarter revisions. I can't give you anything before then because it's all in play. I don't know how much money exactly we have, and I'm not sure what the mayor's going to do. Of all of the budget issues that I'm concerned about right now, the one thing that concerns me the most is revenue sharing.
So that's about is it $4.5 million hit
$4.1 million reduction.
Yeah.
Because we're budgeted at 4.6, and they would take 4.1 out, so we would have about $500,000.
And it was not in the House version of the budget. That's
not
correct. So yeah.
So anyway, on my mind, and that's where we are on the first quarter budget revisions.
You might start factoring in reduced bed tax and rental car tax with the COVID-19 outbreak.
I'm factoring in a lot of things.
I know.
But you're right. I talked to Julie Soppy, I talked to Bill Popp, and it's like somebody took the wind out of their sails right now. It's gonna be pretty brutal. For us, we get about $11 million in bed tax money. It's split three ways. ACB, we use it to pay the debt. That we'll do, and then part of it goes to Visit Anchorage, and part of it comes to us.
Could look at a hand sanitizer and paper, toilet paper tax.
Maybe.
Well, Alyssa just had a great idea, is that we're just going to use all of those hotel rooms for quarantine. You know.
I want to get it first then, so I can get the suite.
Yeah, you want to be first in on that.
Yeah, this one, there's a, yeah, this one's going to be, it's got some new variables. That's what we do.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting.
Well, UA is going to online only, effective next week? Or
The Board of Regents is meeting tomorrow, and I think that's probably what they're going to say.
We have a telecommuting policy that is on my desk that's been drafted in the last 10 days that I'm reviewing that will go out to department heads Friday or Monday. We're also drafting a quarantine policy that will go out sometime next week, and this is all in preparation of what's going on at the Emergency Operations Center. And so, Tasha, your ability to get a hold of the health department to talk about budget might be a little thin right now. They're a little busy, but just FYI.
You probably just want to ask me what we're doing.
Maybe. Anyway, so yeah, lots of distractions.
It's ironic because this on-site consumption thing is coming, and so we wanted somebody from the health department to come talk to the community council about it, and they're like, "Oh, not right now." Like, but it's coming. We've got to vote on it.
Yep. So, thank you.
Then I think that wraps us up. You have a thing on here about an ASD work session. We probably don't need an ASD work session.
No, because I didn't know how I didn't know how this would go, so we won't do the work session.
Yeah.
Again, I will send out notice if you want to see that party again with the assembly. You can do that next Wednesday to see what the assembly thinks. Maybe no one will mention this. A lot of compliments from the assembly about this group recently, about your willingness to extend your time, your willingness to dive in. Nolan kind of summarized the strategy session that you had, willingness to take on review of departments. They were very complimentary of your willingness to engage, and at least at that depth. And so, anyway, so just wanted to share that with you guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Lance. And I've heard some good comments from assembly members too about us, so that's encouraging.
That's it.
Well, thanks a bunch. It's we extended hours and we still managed to spill over a little bit, but thank you for this is a ton of information that we managed to squeeze in. So thanks a bunch for arranging this, Lance and
Okay.
And motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All right.
And there'll be no coffee next month because I'll be bankrupt.
You're not going to be bankrupt.
People aren't going to go to coffee shops.
You know what? So I was at my Rotary Club, and Rochelle is in our Rotary Club. She's the executive manager. She's the operations manager of the cook.
Oh, nice.
And she just said, "You know what, guys?